Thank you for calling Death Before Desk Job. If you are this week's guest, please leave a message and Paul will call you back once he finishes the intro.
Hey, Paul, it's Bruce Pandolfo, AllOne. Yeah, did you hear that beep? I haven't seen anyone in a while, and can you help me out of here? It's just echoes and sound waves, and I don't, please, so, I remember we talked, but, it's forever in here. It's forever. Someone let me out. I'll take the desk job.
Hey, this is Paul. You're listening to Death Before Desk Job, the podcast geared towards creative people who are pursuing or would like to be pursuing their creative endeavors to their heart's content. My guest this week is coming to us from the void that you weren't supposed to find out about. It's the holding room for my guests. His name is Bruce Pandolfo. He's better known by his moniker AllOne. He is a rapper and a poet from right here on Long Island. You can find his stuff at allonevoice.bandcamp.com. You can also find him on Instagram and Twitter at allonevoice. In addition to his solo work, like his latest single, Anodyne is Oblivion, you can also check out his acoustic project that he does with his childhood friend. It's called Almost Elijah. That's also available on Bandcamp. He's also behind the Doug's comic, which was a 3-year-long exercise. And he's also behind Avalanche Canvas, which is a live music, comedy, improv group. I never saw it myself, but I wanted to, and I'd really like to. So y'all go back to wearing your masks and, sheltering in place so that way we can get rid of this COVID stuff and go back to seeing some live stuff. That would be fantastic. I am in need of it. Let's see. He's also taking commissions right now for poems and stuff like that. So if you're looking for a cool holiday gift for, some loved ones, something really special, that's something he's getting into. So might I recommend you going to contact him and check that out. But hey, speaking of holiday stuff, if you out there are looking to plug some of the stuff that you're making this holiday season, you can feel free to tag me on Instagram and I'll share it on there. And I'm considering opening this up to an ad read type of thing, if you would. So I'm thinking for $20, you tell me what you want me to share with the audience here, and I can push your product out. It's small, but local. Your audience is pretty clear, and I think it could be mutually beneficial. You can help finance the show a little bit, and I can help you get some sales for your small business, hopefully. So if you're interested in doing that, contact me at deathbeforedeskjob@gmail.com. And as always, please go to the website, deathbeforedeskjob.net. You can find the show notes for this and previous episodes. You can check out the shop. You can shop through any of the affiliate links in the links tab. And you can always support the show on Patreon. You can make a donation. There's a bunch of ways to support the show, which you can learn about through the support tab on the website. Let's see. Is there anything else major I need to cover this week? Not really. I just need to let you know that next week may not happen. That's only because I'm working on a mural project. It's a pretty big deal for me. I'm very excited. I'm going to be kind of tied up between that and the holiday, which I'll be locking down for. But still, Zoom calls and stuff like that. So with that in mind, I don't know if I'm going to have time to crank out an episode in time for Monday. I'm going to try my best. If not, I'll see you the following week. So yeah, wish me luck on that. I'm excited. And I have a feeling my back's going to hurt. It usually does after painting something very big. I don't want to waste any more time. This is a pretty solid discussion. And I just, again, before we get into it, I want to say thanks to Bruce for all the support up to now. He's been very active in helping get my show out there. He's been a huge proponent for me since day one, and I'm glad that we finally had the time to talk and get to know each other a little better. So without further ado, here's my conversation with the multi-talented Bruce Pandolfo. Hello, Bruce. How are you?
I'm good, Paul. How's it going?
It's going well. You have a smoother voice than I do on this thing right now. I think it's going to be a competition of the smooth voices.
I think that the audience can only benefit from that.
This is a smooth sandwich here, everybody.
That's going to be my rap group, Smooth Sandwich.
I would check that out. But speaking of projects,
yes,
your projects are all over the map. So you have yourself, your AllOne.
Yes.
And then you have your project, Almost Elijah, with your childhood friend whose name is escaping me at the moment, but that's
Johnny. Yes. Johnny Palushak.
Johnny Palushak.
Yeah.
Cool. And then in addition to having these musical projects that you work on, you're writing poetry, and I can see that you're actively putting stuff out there. And you were doing the Doug's comic for a while, if I remember right.
Yeah, it was about daily for 3 years, I think.
It's pretty impressive.
I got tired of it.
Doing anything every day is tiring,
I know.
But all that to say, your output, regardless of the project it is, you're always working on something. You're always putting something out there. And I do admire that tremendously. I guess my question going in, because I was kind of stumped trying to figure out where to start with you. Where do you find the drive to do it every day? What keeps you going?
I suppose it's probably what a lot of other creative people share, which is this frenetic kind of compulsive need to put all of the sort of patchwork ideas and observations that happen to them and funnel it through whatever medium kind of tickles them at the time or whatever they're dabbling in. I guess the other part of it is there's probably three components. There's that, and then the second thing is probably that there's a desire for me to maybe like justify the time and space I'm taking up, and that sort of catalyzes some kind of productivity for me. And at least these ideas are turning into something. I guess the third thing would be because I want these creations to impact people in some kind of way, whether it's like to exercise some kind of things they have going on with them, or to stimulate something positive or thought-provoking in them, or elicit laughter or distraction, the whole function of art. So, all that's to say a desperate plea for attention, a distraction or a healing experience from my own life, and I guess some way to like make some good out of all of the weird cartoonish muses that kind of dance around my head on my day-to-day experience. If anything, it's just that life is more interesting this way.
Right. It seems that your attention is taken so many different places, and I can absolutely understand and relate to the need to scratch this itch and to bounce around. I like what you said about feeling the need to justify your time in existence. I know that feeling, and even though I'm sure through learning we all figure out that we don't really need to do that, at a certain point we choose to do that, right? But that itch doesn't go away, even if you tell yourself that. And as far as the need for attention from others, you certainly seem to have it and hold it and make it worth people's while, because the things you're putting out are certainly of a high caliber. I wanted to say, when it comes to the eliciting a reaction from people, everything you're putting out there is generally positive, engaging, encouraging, certainly like cerebral, and you're attempting to, it seems, almost educate. Am I wrong in making that leap?
Educate. Yeah, I guess so. Even if educate feels condescending in some way, but I think it's important. And I think sometimes, that is a feeling. And if it's not, I guess there's two things, because it could be educating about something intellectual, right? But it could also be like educating about an emotional experience. And you know, in songwriting, it's I'm sure most people feel this, that the songwriting process is trying to articulate an experience we have and then give it over to someone else in hopes that, you know, it will do them some good, or it will do something for them or to them.
Right.
And in that way, that's informing, and I guess hence educating, whether it's about yourself or about the human experience, or just about the revelation that, hey, you know, you're not so alone in that feeling that, or that thought that you thought was solely yours to, or your burden to bear, you know. But yeah, I mean, I guess you said the cerebral thing, and for me, I guess I think a lot of that comes from just what's interesting to me about when I experience art and music, and the stuff that I kind of find most stimulating to me is, I guess, more challenging to me and informs me in some way, or, you know, I'm learning new words, or I'm finding out new avenues of music, or new possibilities in visual art, or something like that. And so, you know, I've kind of, I guess, decided to maintain a style, even with the rapping, like, you know, word choices or references that I use. You know, a lot of my favorite artists, I've learned so much culture and vocabulary and from how they've written. And so, you know, I kind of try to pass or take the torch, if anything, and not to be presumptuous, but to kind of follow in those footsteps and be like, hey, you know what I was really excited about when I learned this author's name, or this incredible movie that's now one of my favorite movies because some rapper used it as a punchline, you know, and and so, you know, you kind of create your own roadmap of Easter eggs in the lyrics, kind of. And I don't know that everyone appreciates that, but I know that I do. And I guess, like, the best thing that you ever hear about art is to make what you like, and
Right.
to fill in a niche that you feel needs filling and expressing. And so, you know, I'm just kind of trying to do that for myself and do so unapologetically, you know.
I would say that's a beautiful answer, and you do seem unapologetic about it. There is so much that I can tell just based on your output. There's a lot that you're taking in, and there's a lot that you're giving back. You're putting it back out there. What you just said about the punchlines and learning things from the punchlines of other rap songs, I think it took me a while to figure out. I didn't listen to too much rap. It was not really my preferred style of music. It's just not something I didn't get into. And it wasn't until later that I started to appreciate the art form more, because the mainstream rap that I was getting my hands on was generally stuffing the song with punchlines that I couldn't relate to. I think the culture is just so different. Like, when the culture is talking, if it's fashion and sneakers or status, like, if that is the lyrical content, and by the way, that's not to say that that's what all rap is, because I know that's the case. I know there's much deeper stuff. I'm saying that the bubblegum pop version of rap, for what I would consume or what I came into contact with, that was lost on me, and it alienated me from the music and the art form. And it wasn't until later, where I started to stumble onto other artists, that I started to kind of understand more about the art form.
Sure. Yeah.
What drew you to this art form specifically?
Well, I have to say, like, that resonates with me a lot, because I kind of grew up listening to a lot of, like, punk rock stuff and pop punk. And even then, the artists I would listen to, like Bad Religion or Anti-Flag, bands like that, there's more of a heavy, interesting, sort of introspective lyric content. And I was always kind of learning, and I was the type of person, I don't know if this is a teenage thing or if this is just something for me. I don't do it anymore, just for the sheer amount of music that I'll consume. But, like, I used to not stop listening to an album till I had all the lyrics memorized, and, like, till I knew all the words, and would pore over the lyric book and, you know, look up definitions for words if I didn't know them and things like that. And so then through Bad Religion, they had a label called Epitaph Records, and they were putting out compilation albums called Punk-O-Rama.
Oh, yeah.
And Yeah. So I picked up, this is around high school time, maybe like 2004. And I picked up, maybe it's Punkorama Volume 8. But they had just signed 3 like underground MCs, Sage Francis from Rhode Island, Idea and Abilities from Minneapolis, and Atmosphere from Minneapolis as well. And they kind of made a more underground, heady, poetic, technical sort of either personal or political sort of rap that finally kind of clicked with me. And I was writing a lot of poetry before that. And I was always a reader, and I was even as a kid making really crappy poems for people for like holidays and stuff. And there's a particular song by Sage Francis called Makeshift Patriot, it was a reaction to 9/11 that kind of just blew my mind. And then I became a Sage Francis like maniac for a while, and listening to his music and poring over it and discovering all this stuff. And it started influencing me to listen to more rap and to write in that style and to put rhythm to what I was doing. And then that kind of opened up the door for me to understand, like you're saying, you know, the particular style of rap that was popular at the time, you know, just wasn't resonating with me. And but I ended up finding something that did. And then discovering through that there's all these, you know, other less popular, but maybe more intricate or challenging or intellectual or emotional or just weird and left field styles of hip hop. And that kind of turned me onto it. And you know, I'm, you know, still listening to it and still making it, you know, 10 years after my first release, still going at it. And so... But yeah, I mean, I could credit a single song for really making it all click for me. And I remember particularly, like, I was writing in a marble notebook in my room, and I would write at least a piece a day. I started like trying to do my best imitation of like writing these rap poem songs or whatever. And it just kept going from there, and it has been like an everyday obsession like 15 years later.
It surprises me that you brought up Sage Francis, because on my little short list of names that I was familiar with, because again, like I never really totally got headfirst into that world, but the names that jumped out to me, I thought of Immortal Technique, KRS-One, Sage Francis. Those are the 3 names that I was going to say.
Yeah.
And then of course, then you go into like MF Doom and things like that, and think like,
sure, yeah,
which is, you know, somebody like that where it's so much about the word craft and
yeah.
I mean, not to say, how do I say it? It all is. And I know that, but
some people really like do it from like a lyricist like kind of thing, and what they're about is rapping and MCing and being a lyricist and pushing that form and their skill set within it, and always making sure like, and the lyrics with someone like MF Doom or, you know, Immortal Technique or any of those people, like the content is king. Whereas they're not really churning out stuff just to churn out stuff. You know, they're artists with it. And that's the kind of thing that I geek out about. And when I can geek out about the music, that's kind of when I get excited. It, you know, it's like anything. Even if I don't know, I think like it's the thing where when you see someone who is incredibly proficient at what they do, you don't even necessarily need to understand or love that thing, but there's just something that gets the hairs on your neck going, and the chills and the awe that it inspires to watch someone do that high wire act between, you know, this graceful, transcendent thing and being somehow human, and knowing that they were a person who had to put in blood, sweat, and tears, and every other cliche about the midnight oil and the 10,000 hours to you know, to corral all of that talent. And to see that, I think, in any form, whatever it is, be it ballet or drumming or rapping, or, you know, anything, that's something that's nothing short of magic, I think. And like, so that stuff is kind of the stuff that I look for as a writer, lyricist, rapper now, it's like, I want the stuff that I'm like, oh shit, how did I not think of that? How do I do that? How do I do what they do? And if I don't feel that feeling, I don't get it. I don't really know why to listen to it with the rapping specifically. Like, I don't know. It's become one of those things where like being behind the scenes kind of ruins it a little for me.
Sure, yeah. You've kind of lifted the curtain back a little bit.
Yeah. I'm like, all right, I know all the, I'm like like you're the David Copperfield and you're like, well, I know the guy at the Sweet 16. I know what he's doing. I need to go see the David Blaine.
Yeah. So in that respect, there is a whole process to the craft of writing and composing the structure of any good rap song. And you clearly take the art of storytelling very seriously. Whether that story you're telling is an actual linear story or it's an emotional story or soliloquy, if you would, like you're clearly good at conveying a complex variety of things. And I'm sure that the process isn't always the same. I'm sure different catalysts will manifest in a song in a different way. So I'm going to put this question to you in the best way I can.
Can you do that with all of them?
No, I'm going to try really hard to do a bad job. But this one specifically, I need you to.
Like, just want you to know this is the only one I'm going to try for. The rest I can botch.
We got like another hour. I'm clocking out at the end.
You go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine, man. I appreciate that, man. So I'd imagine that you have the same experience that maybe I do when I try to write music for myself, where sometimes a word or an idea will come to you, or a concept will come to you. Sometimes it's a string of words that maybe arrive in the form of a melody or a rhythm. And I'm sure sometimes it's just a matter of experimentation. Do these all seem familiar so far? Just
yeah.
Okay. So the reason I asked in that way is maybe you can kind of walk me through maybe how you get from those seed concepts to something that you've deemed complete and that you're happy with.
Seed is a good way to put it. I think there's two origins, I think, for me. So several years ago, I started always carrying around a notebook, and I decided to not censor any ideas, to just take record of everything and cull that and turn it into something later. But just this idea of like, not every idea is going to be good. And certainly not every idea is going to make it to a finished product that I'm going to share proudly with people. But I'm never going to get a decent volume of things if I'm not taking every idea down or seriously, or being generous enough to each germinated concept, like to assume that it could go somewhere. So I have these notebooks full of just random, like you're saying, like I'm in the shower or I'm out walking and I'm kind of I'll sing or I'll freestyle rap or, improvise things to myself out loud and just kind of like get my brain just kind of starts going. And, and so I'll write down something if I think like a certain turn of phrase, comes up and I think like, oh, that's okay. That's an idiom or an expression I've heard. And if I flip it this way, which is something I do a lot, if I flip this term this way, it subverts it and it means something else that might express something about my experience or someone else's. Or, oh, that's a really interesting rhyme pattern. Let me just write that chain of rhymes down real quick. These will be little patches, little quilt work, bits and pieces that may make it into a song at some point. The other way that it will happen is I'll have an idea, basically an intention for a song or an album, of course, it ends up just turning into a song, and then you distill that down. It becomes an intention for a verse, intention for each part of the song. And, but let's say I'll have an idea for a song. Like, I had a song called Roamer about a friend who was a loner, who was depressive, who was a graffiti artist, and who was a person in my life. And I thought was the perfect, interesting example of almost the cliche anxious artist, or someone who had found salvation in their life through an art form. And so I just started, I would be like, okay, there on paper or in my head, okay, this Roamer song, right? Like, I'd start kind of just, sometimes I just take down bits and pieces about the topic, and I'll just scribble away. And for most songs, I probably write 3 songs worth of words to get a song. It's a matter of like the hard thing of cutting the fat and killing your darlings, which for someone with so much content in their songs, you'd think like there's much more fat to cut, and that's probably true. But I assure you, I've usually cut way more than you might think. So it's just collecting ideas. You know, I might list a series of words that I know are associated with that thing. So with that, it was like painting or and trains and train yards. And I'm like, you know, train yards, painting. He was a skater. Like, let me write down words and phrases that have to do with skating, like images that come to mind. And, you know, what do I want to convey to the listener to really paint this picture or paint this feeling out via words? And I kind of will aggregate all of those things, and then it just becomes a matter of like ordering them in a right way. Sometimes things are more stream of consciousness in how I present them. Other times they're, like you said, a linear point A at the beginning of the song and a point B at the end. Or each verse might serve a purpose in the, you know, in stating a specific feeling or scene or setting or event. Mm-hmm. And it just becomes a matter of like putting it down into those spaces, and obviously then working with the rhythms and the music and making everything fit or feel right and feel like it connects. And I guess the last thing is like, if all of that sounds kind of like this ugly patchwork thing, what I end up doing after I have all these different parts that might kind of be Frankenstein clumsily next to each other is I'll go in and I will like look at ways to make there be a consistent through line between each section. So if the first 8 bars of a verse, you know, came from one particular type of rhyme pattern or rhythm, and then the next 8 bars was something else, I'll find a way to interweave those things so they feel like they belong together. So there'll be a rhyme pattern that happens in the B part of the verse that I'll introduce as an inner rhyme in the A part or something. Like I'll do something like that. So it's like, oh, this is hinting to that later, you know? And so your head's already like heard those words or heard like that particular rhyme pattern or that particular wordplay theme. And then when it comes in later, you're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Those things are interwoven and they belong there.
Right.
So yeah, that's sort of a pretty granular, long-winded way of thinking about it, but that's what I want to hear. At least some of the sausage making process for me.
There you go. Like that's you said before. It's like, oh, I cut the fat, and if you know my material, you'd be surprised that I did, or you know, there's still more to cut. Your content, it is verbose and it's chock full of story and it's chock full of words, but you always manage to make it so it's attention grabbing and it always keeps your attention. You absolutely have the element of skill down to deliver it in a way where it's not only digestible, but it's good. It's not saccharine and it's not boring. So as far as making all these things work, just from having heard your stuff, I can see the amount of labor.
Thank you. To that point, like for better or worse, because maybe being so laborious about it is not the best way to go about art. I don't know. But
well, it's the way it works for you, you know.
I think of it as work, yeah. a lot of the time, even if I'm in a flow and I'm happy and I'm excited and it's pouring out of me, or sometimes I'm scratching my head and I'm trying to find literally the last word that doesn't happen for weeks or months. I've had songs that take some years to write, and it's just something hits and I learn something that clicks, and I'm like, oh wow, that was, and it'll be a chain of images or ideas or phrases, and it'll connect. But thank you for saying that. And because I like this about songs and songwriting, I know it's dense, and I want to reward repeat listens.
Mm-hmm.
Some of my favorite artists, 10 years down the line, I'm still discovering things in the verses. I'm still understanding new things, whether it's a line I didn't get before, or a rhythm I didn't notice, a weird pocket somehow that just kind of flew past me because it was mellifluous and it was, sonorous enough, or it's just some clever little play on words that I didn't understand the first time. And like, that's kind of the experience I enjoy. And it's kind of the puzzle work of the making things that I like to do when I'm making my own stuff. And so I am always thinking, like, if someone's poring over this with a microscope and looking word to word at it, I want it to pass that test. I want it to make it through that scrutiny.
Right.
And I guess it's because I think of myself before anything else as a writer, and as having just some obsessive, weird relationship to words and using them in some way. That even if it's totally a delusion, I think of it as like someone looking over the words on a page, and I want to reward the courtesy of that listening time, or the courtesy of that reading time, right? It's an honor to be a part of someone's life in that way, and it seems like a disservice to squander that by phoning it in.
That was beautifully put. I really love that. The fact that you refer to it as the puzzle work that you're doing to reward the person, to thank them for their attention. That's a really beautiful sentiment. It makes me wonder what kind of things held your attention. Because I know that you had mentioned to me earlier before we got started, you said, I don't know if it's the ADHD or what. Do you think that plays into the need to make something so engaging that you can't look away from it because it's something that you're looking for in other art?
Yeah, definitely. I've thought a lot about that recently, and thought about how, for me to feel satisfied with it, which is interesting, right? Like I don't really listen to the music after I make it. I just go make other stuff after it, and just put it out to the world, and I don't have to think about it anymore. Unless I'm performing it, but that's a different ritual. What we think is good is just based on rules we've decided on, right? That's subjectivity at its root. And like, I guess my rules are, like you're saying, to capture attention, or I'm projecting my perceptions onto the audience. So I might imagine that if the flow doesn't change up every 4 bars, that they're going to be like, this is fucking boring. Yeah. Maybe no one would ever think it. Maybe 5 people would think it. Maybe everyone would think it. And maybe any of those scenarios shouldn't affect how I think. But it's because it's how I experience things sometimes that I think I have the particular like code of style, or code of creative ethics, or, execution that I do. Yeah. It's
good that you could be cognizant of that fact. And certainly it sounds like in the setting of making something happen, you are your own critic. Like you said, you're making the assumption that people will find it boring if you don't do this or that. The fact that you're able to be self-reflective in that capacity is it certainly shows just in the quality of the craft that you're doing. I did want to circle back, because I wrote this down and I didn't want to forget it. But you did mention something about germinating these ideas, and that sometimes it could take you weeks, months, years to find the missing piece to a particular idea. And I was curious if you had an example of that. Any noteworthy stories about such a time where you had to wait for the right thing to come along?
Certainly, yeah. So my 2016 release, I've been thinking, I have a song on there called Zoom In. And that song, it was inspired by my long-standing fascination with upstate New York. And my parents took me upstate camping since I was like 6 months old. I just have had this long affinity for upstate New York and these small towns, and in traveling and in touring and in, going camping and being up there. And then I went to school in Oswego for a year, and in like 2009 and 10. And so I started writing this song, and it had always been in my head to work on that stuff. And the song is inspired by all those experiences and all those drives, and all those things. And it focuses really on this idea of these small towns and of these like dots on a map, and remembering like, oh yeah, each of those places has their own social and economic and political and romantic and criminal microcosms, and they're not just these like little pass-through places, or they are for us, but they're not for other people who are there for better or worse. I had started writing that song and had gotten a lot of work out. I had gotten a lot of verses out for it, and a lot of sections and a lot of ideas. And it just, those things just kind of stayed in a notebook. And then my buddy Dope Knife, he sent me some beats, and he has a label called Dope Sandwich that he released that album on. And so having that beat and having the idea to work on that song kind of reinvigorated that. However many months later, or maybe it was even a year or so, like I'll just write stuff and I'll set it down, and I'll have the song idea in my head. It'll be something I want to achieve, something I want to crystallize, some feeling or place or story, or an event that I want to represent somehow through music or whatever medium it is. And, if I don't make it work immediately, I don't forget about it. In fact, it's almost one of these things where it's nagging at me to finish it, whether I share it or not. And even if I don't ever, or I know in my head, like, I'm not going to put that out there, it's still something I think about, as something I put down, right? Or something incomplete that's lingering in the hopper, sinister, And so I think it was maybe a year or so after that, I was on tour in 2014. I did this solo tour for like 5 weeks, and I was in Albany. I finished writing the song. Like, I reopened my notebook, and one of the notebooks that I had, and I don't know, I'd seen some stuff, or some things people said to me, or something I'd seen. I don't remember the exact moment or what catalyzed it, but something I saw just was like, oh, wow, that's the way to express that idea. Or like that, I had this much more to say, and I just experienced the thing, or heard the phrase, or whatever that was what was missing. And then I sat in this person's house in Albany, and I finished writing the song happily in this kind of fun, the VH1 Wikipedia Easter eggy thing of my own experience of like, oh yeah. And the other thing is I finished the Zoom In song, which is about being upstate, like, wow, how nice. And so yeah. And I think if I think about it, that probably took me 2 years, through maybe 3, to really, from when I thought of the idea to when I actually crystallized it into a thing. And then once the song's done, it may take another year to come out. So who knows? So that's just how it goes sometimes with indie music. But that's one journey, one example of a song like that.
It's amazing that you were able to, eventually get back to it. And I there are so many cases where you just have something sitting there that just never, gets, it's not tended to, it gets neglected, you forget about it. I've had that happen. I'm sure you have had that happen too. And then on the other side of the coin, there's things that just come to you in a flash. There's things that happen in a it seems to happen like magic sometimes. Is there any time that has happened for you where it's kind of all materialized within like an incredibly short period of time? is that a process that you have found to be repeatable, or is it a simulation you can run again, if that makes sense?
Definitely less so, but in the last few years, I mean, so like the book that I published, like the poetry book, This Is Criminal, that's 30 poems that I wrote in 30 days, or stories and songs and whatnot. And so it was part of the National Poetry Month. And, I just did like a public accountability thing, and I was doing it for a contest, and I was like, write a poem a day. It was like the Inktober for poets. And so I just did it. And that was an experience where it was healthy for me, because it was made me be much less discerning and, just to have less demands on myself, and to just work under the duress and motivation of a deadline.
Mm-hmm.
And in that, you let certain things go, right? You just say like, well, this is what I was able to do in this time, and the stuff needs to get done. You can't make a song that's like, well, it took this long, but it's the perfect thing. It's like, well, there's always something you can change, right? It's the artists don't finish, they abandon sort of thing. And, and so lately I've been trying to be a lot less on top of the stuff like that. I'm working right now on an LP that will happen after Emotionauts, with a local producer, Smooth Beats, Smoothie, Austin Sandick. I don't know if you know him.
I don't think I've met him before.
He plays guitar for a band, Dara. Great dude, really talented, kind of immensely talented. But like, because this album that I'm working on now, Emotionauts, and putting out stuff for, is very kind of progressive and intense and emotionally intense. He's come at me with these sort of old school sample based hip hop stuff. And I'm like, I'm just going to like try to write these songs like very quickly and let things go, and not care so much if like, I try to like do things with every song where like I think that no one's heard it or done it before. And like, that's a lot of pressure and probably delusional, because everything's been done under the sun. And like, and maybe it's too much to throw at people all the time of like, hey, here's not only like words you've not heard, references you've not heard, cadences that are not typical, over music you're rarely hearing, with a song structure that's, weird, and a topic that's sort of odd and left field. Like, that's just too much for people to. It's like the hardest act in like Interstellar for the whole movie, and it's like, that's not the best thing always. It's like interesting and good sometimes, but so it's for me and for people again, like. So yeah, like I've written, I think 3 songs, and they've all happened in the space of like a few hours. Like I wrote this one song because I walked into the comic shop and I saw something. I saw a character, I think from He-Man, and I was like, Orko, and I just started freestyling, and I was like, oh, that's a verse. And then I went home, and then like an hour or 2 later, that song, I had tracked the whole demo and wrote the whole song, and I was like, oh, fun. That's it. That's done. Like, don't look back over it. It's fine. Like I'm just kind of screwing around. I'm just rapping and like, that amount of relaxation about it was liberating in its way. And it was, some people connected with that in a different way than they connected with other stuff.
Yeah.
It speaks to the age old thing of like, sometimes it comes through if you try too hard. Right. So, and sometimes the trying too hard thing is just like, I mean, it took Leonard Cohen, how long to write Hallelujah? Like, so there's no wrong or right way to do it.
Everyone's got a different line. Some people are very calculated and thorough and just don't want to break, the product is all that matters. And like you said, how long does it take? And then other people are just like, it's a moment in time. Let's get it out there. I mean, some people are just very impermanent about it. It's a time capsule. It's a
Yeah,
moment.
yeah.
It's whatever. You had to be there.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be evergreen. It doesn't have to stand the test of the next 100 years. It, like I felt it. I put it out. People might like it for a while, and by then I'll have been doing other things. So it's fine.
Yeah. That's got to be a hard habit to break, though. I mean, it sounds like you're doing an exercise in that.
Sure. Yeah. And the other way I've been enjoying the impermanence thing is getting together in these improv jam group Avalanche Canvas with my friends Lorianne Crayus and my fellow like rapper, writer, producer friend Covey, and my housemate and AllOne in the Room drummer bandmate Mike Seta Ducati. We've just been kind of getting together and doing like kind of comedy / musical, like jazz, hip hop fusion stuff, and it's all improv, like from music to lyrics. It's we're like posing skit situations at each other. We're doing like improv games, and we only did one performance so far, but like it was this things, people were cracking up, laughing their heads off, and we don't know what the hell we did at the end of it, and like we'll never do it again. And it's like celebrating that aspect of music, because I've always loved the improv aspect of things. So that's another way that like my relationship to creating and sharing has kind of been able to experience something that's a little more immediate and a little more loose, or actually a lot more loose, a lot looser. Yeah. That's been rewarding and fun in its way.
Is it any more or less rewarding?
It's just different things.
Yeah. I had a feeling.
Yeah.
I'm glad you described Avalanche Canvas, because I didn't even know where to, I couldn't even understand what exactly it was based on the description.
Yeah. It's hard. It's like, also it's a weird thing to talk about, because it's not like a project. It's more like, I think of it as like what I want to do with it. It's weird now because it's very performance based, so we can't really do that. Maybe we'll do live streams. I want to treat it as like the musical circus is coming to town, and you show up and you have an experience and we disappear, and the songs get made. And I almost wanted to, I talked to them about it, and I almost wanted to like discourage people from recording it in any way, and really just be present. The stuff doesn't, it might be funny. A song might be funny, but like nothing makes sense outside of the context of the room.
Yeah.
And be very, I'm very like kind of agnostic, atheistic, materialist about things, and I'm not very like woo-woo about stuff, but I wanted to treat it like the magic ritual of like what performance and art does, and how being in a room and experiencing something, and how unique the confluence of the space you're in and the people that are there, and all those influences, and how they bend and mold the musical and lyrical and even personalities and characters that we'll be doing or whatever. Like, I want all of that to be there and then, and for people to be present for it. And I think it's like both embracing the very like microwave culture we have, but it's also kind of avoiding altogether the record and document everything culture that's a part of as well. Right. That altogether is something I love about music and about live music and about jamming, and which has always been part of my artistic or like my performance and experience, is like jamming with musicians and stuff. Right. And yeah, I think that's what I love about it, is again like that tightrope walk thing, and the all the flash bulbs that go off when everyone's operating in the moment and together and collaboratively and whatnot.
You said that you weren't woo-woo about stuff, and I don't think I'm the same way. I think I'm similar in that respect, but at the same time, yeah, it's sort of undeniable that when you're in a room making stuff with other people and ideas start going off, if you connect on an idea, or you guys play with an idea, whether it be you and one person or you and the audience, there is an energy that gets created. And it's really, I think you could be 100% scientific and look at things in a completely pragmatic way and still acknowledge that thing that you feel is very real. So I'm glad you're doing that. And if you do get into live streaming, that I'd love to tune in. I'd love to see that happen. And yeah, you're talking about like just like kind of limiting the recording and whatnot. Interestingly enough, it's sort of the thing that kind of confuses me about like, I don't know, like the Grateful Dead or something, where like they're there. It's like, hey, we're playing music, we're present, we're in the moment. Yet there's a culture of people who are recording it. And the whole thing is you got to go to a show. You got to go to a show. But the whole thing is that people are taping it and like trying to bottle it. And it seems like within their own world, that's just an example, but in that world, it's like, it's a conflict of ideas. I don't know. As much as I may roll my eyes at somebody recording a concert on their phone, because I'm like, what are you going to watch it on this vertical screen? But at the same time, if it does it for them, you know, maybe they want to relive it. I just know for myself, I could record a concert and I'll never watch it again.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not going to say that I'm this Luddite that's kind of above or avoiding technology, right? Like I've got my phone addiction or whatever. You know, all the interactions with stuff, and I'm taking photos all the time, and I'm taking videos, and I certainly have taken video at concerts. But like, you know, studies show that you remember events better if you're not taking photos of them to review later. You'll actually have the experience more ingrained in your memory. And I guess the other thing is like what you said about the Grateful Dead, and I know that was just an example, and this is just a guess, but I would assume, I mean, this is a band that was around 60s, 70s, right? So, you know, it's probably more just like modernity and modern culture catching up to what was previously an exclusively live experience, right? So, you know, and that's with anything. I mean, I know like I appreciate when people are taking videos and stuff, but there's also something when I'm performing, right? But there's also something that's like, at the same time, like I know that there's, because I've been there, like you said, like you are going to watch that later in a tiny little Game Boy, you know, like, why are you there? Like you basically paid to show up and watch a YouTube video that you were half present for later.
Yeah, you made a lot of work
with crappy
for
sounds. Yeah. And so that's really interesting. And I know I've heard like Jack White stopped touring for this reason. He said personally, like, and I know like he's a very like weird into vintage analog type of stuff and whatnot, and very more like to think Luddite sort of traditional type person. And for him, I think like what I recall his testament to that being is he's like, I need, you know, when I perform, I put everything into it and I need the crowd with me. And the last couple tours, I was looking out into a sea of like flash from cameras and tablets and no faces. And that just was killing me. Like I was out there to have the most visceral, raw, emotional, connected experience of my life every night, and hoping that they would have the same with music they allegedly love. And neither of us were getting that anymore. And he said, so I think he got like dispirited from that. And I could completely understand that, how for certain people that might be the case, right? It's very interesting. That being said, I can't wait till performances are happening regularly again, and I don't care if someone's coming out with 80 phones per person, just come be in a space and be present and perform and have warmth in the room.
Just be around other people. Are you familiar with the when you said have 80 phones on you? Have you ever seen the video? It was this gentleman in Asia, and he was so into Pokemon Go that he built like a gigantic rack on the front of his bicycle that had like 25 cell phones on it. Did you ever see it?
No, that's amazing. He's like he's like Alfred and Batman in Dark Knight, where he just has this panorama of screens and like a full panopticon access to the world, just so he can catch augmented reality monsters.
Yes, exactly.
That's unbelievable.
I'm picturing an audience of that guy times 50 at a local bar. I'll take it.
Yes. Yeah.
But I miss that so much, and I would trade that in a minute. You bring up Avalanche Canvas of jazz and comedy and songwriting, and you know, it's all over the map. But then you also have your work with Almost Elijah, which is you and Johnny Palushak, and that is definitely much more in the indie acoustic ballpark. Am I right in saying so?
Yeah, definitely.
You know, I also know you had the Doug's comic that we talked about for a little bit, which was a couple of years ago that you were doing consistently. They're obviously completely different things. The commonality is you and the way your voice has to come through it. But there is like a different language in some capacity, because I don't know that when it comes to rap, you have to fit certain words into meter, and not to say that they always have to, or that but the structure of a song is the same. Maybe a song for Almost Elijah isn't going to have as many words jammed into it. And with the comic like Doug's, it's a matter of being absolutely succinct. Like the jokes are funnier when they're shorter, you know? So having a handle on the language in that respect is interesting to me. I like the fact that you have certain avenues where you have to make as much happen as possible. And then you have these other avenues where it's like, let's get it down to the tiniest little punchline that we can. I'm curious about how you switch language in that respect. And if you ever find yourself in situations where you're creating something where you just have this, this snippet, this idea, and it falls perfectly into the package for one particular project. Say, let's use Doug's as the example. This nugget would be great for something like this, but it's too good. And I feel like I want to try to blow it up and inflate it and put it into this Almost Elijah song, or I want to inflate. I mean, and obviously the tone's different, but I think you understand my sentiment, where inflating or compacting. Have you ever run into issues with that, or have you ever found yourself in that situation? Or do you just kind of know where it's going to land?
Generally, the ideas present themselves, and it's usually kind of obvious what category or what project would best articulate and express them. And then, the medium of choice only happens because I want to find the best way to share that idea. Mm-hmm. Like there's certainly like the Halcyon Wonders album from, or even For a Year, the first one we did for Almost Elijah. Neither of those things would have been successful AllOne songs or like rap songs or even like as poems. Like I had certain sentiments that I just felt, or certain ideas and overarching themes that I felt would be best expressed had I done this indie acoustic, sort of Decemberists, Van Morrison influenced sort of thing. And I guess the other thing is like if I get an idea and then I decide like, this would be, I could really talk about this in an interesting way or an intense way or an emotional way. If I did it in an AllOne track, like that stuff, then it's just a matter of like kind of donning that cap. Like even like what you said about Doug's, like I was punching in quote unquote every day, to do that. So I would just be like, sometimes I would just take a thought and I would just mull it over and be like, what's the funny thing about this idea? Like, what's the funny thing about this thing I'm looking at right now? Like, what's funny about this salsa? Like, oh, it's ketchup with pulp. Okay, that's a Doug's thing.
Yeah.
Like, it's stupid shit. Like becoming that character and sort of like method acting yourself into a result. Mm-hmm. And that was just what it is. And I guess the other thing is like with something like Doug's, where it was a daily thing and it was these pithy, what Reddit compartmentalizes as these shower thoughts. I come to find later, that is like, oh, I know like once a day, or like I know that it's in my ledger of ideas or tasks to do for the day to find a thing that becomes a Doug's comic, And so it's just like, it's kind of, my brain now has a task. And the reason that whole thing started, that became like a 3 or more year daily comic, was because I just started thinking of it as like, what if I just did like my own daily puzzle? But the puzzle was, I have to come up with this thing. And I was just like, let me just do it every day for a week. And then I just didn't stop for 3 years.
That's commitment. That's commitment.
You set the bar low, and you that's the best way to motivate or to get you going on something new, I think, is to imagine it as it were, if it were easy, and then kind of, get into it that way. Eventually you can build up from there.
I could definitely appreciate that. It's hard enough for me to start something because I tend to look at the end product, and it's hard for me to commit to doing something. I mean, doing the show, for example, the only reason that I really pursued it is because instead of going like, let me make an episode and see what happens, I had to tell myself, can this keep going, and can the structure maintain for years? Like, right. So there's like, I need to know the thing's got legs, and I'm afraid to experiment sometimes. So just hearing that Doug's was not like it
wasn't a plan. That's kind of how my brain works, though. It's like I'm much more myopic than that. I'm much more. I don't see past my nose usually. And so, I just kind of am like, oh, this is exciting. Like, this is a shiny new concept that the muses have thrown at my face, and maybe I'll chase it for a while and I'll see how it goes, and, for better or worse. It means that I don't always have great execution in plans, or I don't always have great long-term execution of things, but, I have made a lot of things, and I've been stimulated by a lot of things, and overjoyed by the fact that I never let imagining how it would be perfect, or if it were a quote unquote good, safe idea and like a worthwhile business venture or whatever. Yeah. Like, if I did that, I'd be someone who researched a book so long they never wrote it. Mm-hmm. And I'll never be that person.
Well, it's something that I admire about you, because it's something I myself am trying to learn. Was it always that way for you? Were you always the type of person who couldn't see past your nose, or did you ever, or is it just always how it's been?
Yeah, no, I've always had this huge nose, and I could never see past it. Like.
It's
like
a very
Pokemon
long.
Go wall.
We're on Zoom right now. I can't even see your face.
Yeah, we're on Zoom, and you could touch it.
Yeah,
and we're not in the same town. That's how big it is.
It's remarkable, actually.
Yeah, actually, there's some people running up to pull orange flags out of it right now. It's for the '90s kids.
That's impressive. Even that is, just even that joke you just made, which is, it's like there is like you clearly have I want to ask if it's a gift or if it's something that you practice in terms of just your retention for referential material. Because I don't know, that to me was that is a punchline that you just pull out of thin air,
Yeah.
So I don't know. Is as far as your memory goes, is that something you've ever actively like worked on, or are you just blessed with this amazing memory? Because I don't have one. Or as far as connecting the dots goes, even.
Oh, sure. No, I think it's like it's sort of a function or a dysfunction. However, it's a consequence, I believe, of like the sort of ADHD brain thing, and I think it's like a lot of people with that tend to be creative. And I believe it's because of the dot connecting nature of thought forming. And when an idea happens, it's why the freestyling works for me. I mean, which has been a practice thing over the course of my life. But in elementary school, I was able to like improvise songs relatively like well to friends and with friends on walks home from school and stuff, and make up random shit. And it's just like the stuff happens rapidly. When you said if it was a gift or if I had to learn it, I thought you were going to say if it was a gift or a curse, and the answer is yes. It's just like it's not like I intentionally curated this encyclopedic knowledge of anything. I mean, I think like we all have that. Like we improvise all our conversations, and you don't know why the words or the references generally that you make are coming up or showing up. They're kind of like magically appearing in what seems to be nearby and available to you. Mm-hmm. I think at least experientially, that's how it seems to me. I'm a voracious reader. I watch a lot of things. I read books every day, but when you say something, when you say nose, I just start riffing, and I'm like, and I just start thinking, and stuff happens, like, and stuff pops up, and I'm like, oh, that's funny. Maybe that's a good angle. Maybe that's a funny thing, or that reminds me of this, and then I'm just shooting them all out there and see what happens.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm just curious. That's always the thing that sort of fascinated me about any writer at any capacity, whether you're writing a book, you're writing a story, you're writing anything. It's the ability to connect these dots. And I could see the ADHD aspect playing into that. Certainly because I know myself, I've never been diagnosed as such.
I should say neither have I, mm-hmm. But there's a couple of stories and just general like things that are like, oh yeah, no, definitely that's what it was. Mm-hmm. And the reason I'm not diagnosed is because like doctors said to my mom, like, hey, there's like a 99% chance your kid has it. And she's like, he'll just think it's a crutch. Never mind. Let's not follow up. But yeah, I'm like, and I should also just say as a caveat, like, I don't think that's the only reason. I think, yeah. I think like creatively in general, that's how it goes. And I think that's at least for my experience and with talking to a lot of other people, I think these things just like happen in a chain of like of cause and effect and of associated ideas. Mm-hmm. And, that's kind of how my writing comes out of these associated chains of words and concepts and idioms and images and rhymes and wordplay, etc.
Absolutely. I understand what you're saying. I was interested in learning a little bit more about you because I only know so much about you. And one of the things I did not know is if you held the job that was related to writing and creativity, or if you're just out there doing this all the time, and what that was like for you. Mainly because I noticed it seems like your more recent things that has caught my attention is that did you recently stumble onto a typewriter?
Yeah, my step grandma just had it in a room, and I was like, oh, that's cool. I was looking into those, and she was like, oh, just have it. And then I was like, oh, yeah, all right, maybe I can do something with this.
And I saw that you've been making one of a kind commissioned pieces for people. On
yeah, this. Yeah, that's been that was one of the reasons I was thinking about getting a typewriter. Was I had known about people doing that. Like busking, kind of making poetry on the spot for strangers and doing that. Mm-hmm. And there was obviously a certain romance and concept around that. And I had one that an ex gave me like years ago. And it was kind of ungainly and it smelled great. It smelled wonderfully of oil and of ink and it mm-hmm. sounded cool. But I was very clumsy on it. And I'm not a person who's going to like choose sentimentality over effectiveness. Like I don't care if I'm typing it on my phone or I'm writing it in my notebook or I'm putting it on a computer. Like I just, whatever I can do to trick the work into getting done. So I ended up selling off when bills were tight, as they always are. But I started thinking about that again recently. And I watched a documentary, I think to kind of hype myself up about the idea, called California Typewriter. I think it's on Prime. There's a beautiful, beautiful documentary about a typewriter, a business that's been open since the 70s or something in Berkeley, California, I believe. I had watched that, and I had read Tom Hanks's recent story collection, common type or uncommon type, I think it's called. He's weirdly a typewriter collector, and so he wrote all these stories, and he includes typewriters in each of them. And I just kind of got this wistfulness about it. And then, I read a little more and thought a little more about it. And then I stumbled upon this one my grandma had. And, there's a lot of talk in this idea of what the magic or the reason for using one in modern times would be. And I was interested in hearing about that because, like I said, I didn't really I'm not, I might have a mustache and glasses and a flat cap, but I don't care about having a typewriter if it's not going to do anything for my creative purposes or something. It's not interesting to me aside from a set piece. So, but yeah, there's this idea that's come up now in that, and what I knew when writing some stuff I wrote on the old one was that the machine itself kind of influences the outcomes creatively. The medium itself, it would be like playing a guitar with 4 strings, that when it's not supposed to, right? Or discovering so the medium influences the message kind of, and with a typewriter, what happens is everything is permanent as you're doing it. So if I'm writing something, it slows my brain down in a time as a person who needs that anyway. That's something that's kind of salubrious and healing. If I hit a key and I type the wrong letter, suddenly I have to make that work because it's there, and I don't want to have to retype the whole thing. So now, all right, the next word begins with an H. It was supposed to be an S, but it's an H word now.
Yeah.
And so that's a really unique experience for writing right now.
Yeah. We're very used to undo, delete.
Right. And that does something. It's paralyzing. You get choice, you get what is it? Like analysis paralysis, people say, or you get kind of decision fatigue, you can write anything and there's no consequences, and you could retype the same first line a million times and never get to line 2, right? So with this, the first line you typed it. You got to move on. And so that's kind of interesting. And there's a ton of Instagram poetry stuff and whatnot. And lately, I've been, like I said earlier, some things just take a long time with releasing things. And I had wanted something that I could make that would immediately impact people or would immediately interact with them personally, like how live music does, which we don't have that anymore lately. So I was like, oh, what if I can't go busking right now, but what if I just start trying some stuff out? And I just started writing some little poems, and it's improv in a way, like any writing is improv, like any draft of something. If you were to hit record on your phone and start playing a ukulele and just say, I'm going to play and then I'm going to shut it off in 3 minutes, that whatever that end product is, it's going to be a first draft, but it's going to be an improv, so, this is like that a little bit. And what's kind of cool is I was like, wow, creates an artifact. It's not just a piece of writing. It's also like a visual art piece kind of. Mm-hmm. It only exists here on this piece of paper. So that was kind of interesting. And then I put some of those out there, and I just said, you know what? Let me just say I'm doing commissions. And in the last 3 weeks, I've had maybe 14 or so offers of people asking me to write stuff for them and to be some conduit for their emotional experience or whatever they've been thinking about, which is a huge honor and a challenge and a beautiful kind of thing. And it's I can make something for someone, and it kind of puts me in a different headspace and maybe makes me think about the stuff in a way that I wouldn't ordinarily, or things that I know about them provide a certain lexical color palette, like a certain word bank or reference bank or image bank, because I know that whatever, they like longboarding or they're into witchy crystals and stuff. And so suddenly oh, okay, that's an avenue of language I have to draw from, to talk about these things and to personalize it for them, but maybe puts me in a place that I wouldn't have ordinarily been if I had started from the so-called ether, or whatever, without direction from someone else. So that's been something that's been pretty fulfilling and exciting lately. And maybe, honestly, I don't like to talk about money, and I'm very uncomfortable and squeamish about business and money and all that stuff. And I need to get better about it. But, if it goes the way it's been going, like by the end of 2020, I may be able to pay my rent on writing. And that's kind of, I will probably weep for a day if that happens. It's kind of a dream come true in an interesting way. So
It's amazing.
It's an exciting prospect. Yeah. And all just because of happening to see a machine and my grandma just being like, just have it. I don't care. Which is kind of, it's just taking what you have and making something of it, and seeing like what we talked about at the head of the show, right? Yeah. Like, what can I do to interface with people and to make some changes, or to make them cause changes in me and improve my work and whatnot, right?
Yeah. I mean, that brings it around beautifully again to interfacing with others. And it also brings it up to the idea of opening yourself up to improvisational situations and letting go a little bit in that respect. I feel like that particular project that you've been doing, it does remind me, there's a few things I wrote down. But one, I have to show you this project I did a while back with the typewriter, because I have a typewriter project from a couple of years ago too, and I want to show you, but I have to find it. So remind me to do that. Also, you said you're committed to the letter that goes down to the typewriter. It just made me think of that Mitch Hedberg joke. Are you familiar with it?
I don't know. Maybe not.
Oh, it was a great joke. Rest in peace, man. But he had this great joke. He was like, I tried writing a letter to my dad, and I wanted to write down, I really miss you. But instead I wrote rarely, but I didn't want to have to go back and change it. So I wrote, I rarely drive steamboats, Dad. There's a lot you don't know about me. Just like having to be committed to the thing you write down.
Yeah. Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah. Yeah. And I should say, I don't know that we touched on this, but I feel like all of it is in the spirit of trying new things and pushing myself in new directions.
Yeah.
And like with the poems, I'm like, I don't want them to rhyme. I want them to be more like prose poems, or I want them to be more of the poetry form, and acquaint myself with writing in that way, in a way I haven't before. And like, that's not to pat myself on the back, but just to kind of, I guess, like put it out there that like, I think like that's how you make art well, or you can, or hopefully, or like how you can get near that sometimes. The way up, I think, or laterally or something, is to keep exploring the mountain of your like creative experience and output and expression, right? Is just like, oh, this is something different. Let me try singing on this. Or this is something different. Let me try this with a live band. Or let me paint with only, these colors. Or let me design within a certain amount of time, or whatever it is. Like, just keep imposing new rules and keep seeing like what you can do. And I think that's the thing that keeps your art interesting. It's the thing that keeps your life in general, but like your creative experience interesting and meaningful and productive and like expressive and unique, is continually putting yourself in situations where your preconceived notions of what is good, or what your quote unquote style is, or intentions are challenged, right? And are different. That's sort of been my ethos throughout. Is just like, let me try something else. Let me do something different. Let me go, probably to a fault. Not to say I've become some like master of all, whatever, but just that like I'm constantly like trying to learn a new thing, or try a new thing out, or do a new approach.
Yeah.
That's not to say that's so amazing of me. I think it's been an amazing experience, and a challenging one, and a beautiful one. And I think that's an intrinsic experience for that approach to making things, is the perpetual curiosity and the perpetual surrender to how much we don't know, and the joy of how much we can learn.
What would you say to somebody who's afraid to step outside of what they know?
I would ask them why they're afraid of stepping outside of what they know. And I would imagine if they really got down to it, it would be because they would be afraid to fail, or afraid to be foolish, or to look foolish, or to sound bad, because they're comfortable. And I think comfortable is a place where art doesn't really do so well. Finding new frontiers, to get a little, you don't have to be like, I am really great. You know, I'm not going to put out a fucking saxophone album next month when I've never played saxophone. That's not what I mean. But it's like, just keep finding a new frontier to edge yourself out towards, and you'll grow, you know, by steps. And I think your audience will appreciate that. I think your art will be better for it. I think you'll be a better person for it when you triumph over the struggle, and you'll feel more confident, and you'll have a broader skill set, and you'll, you know, to me, this is all about communication. And I think that's regardless of if it involves language or not. And it's like what we were talking about before the show. It was like with vocabulary and all that stuff. Like, how do you learn to always be able to communicate something if you don't have the broadest possible palette to paint your canvas with, you know?
Right.
And that palette can be a whole pantheon of skills, disciplines, perspectives, styles, and modes of expression and means of conveying a concept or a feeling or an idea. And I think it's kind of like our duty as artists, and not to be too highfalutin about it, but like, this is a job. This is a calling. I think if you care about it, then I don't think you should mince words. And if you're going to do that, I think you should do it fiercely. And I think you should do it with pride. And I think you should do it humbly. And I think you should know you're a conduit for other people's experience in a way.
Yeah.
Whether you've had a conversation and you make a typewriter poem with them, or you're improvising about their idea, silly or not, or you're just making something isolated in your room. If you do that honestly, and you take it seriously, and you love it, and you treat it like the magic that it is, I think that's when you connect with something more ephemeral or more human, and more, this is maybe where the woo sounds like it comes in, but something more universal, something that like comes through the pores of our seeming differences and breaches past our individuality and touches on the thing that my moniker hints at, which is that sort of AllOne universality thing. The whole point of that moniker is that the line between AllOne and the universality is porous and maybe one line away. And that line might be an L in a moniker, or it might be, or you know, it might be just the cheesecloth of reality and delusion between us that, you know, we are the same. You know, like, and art helps breach those things, those barriers, I think, and it's a great thing to be doing, and I think to do it well is important, and I think we need it in these hard times more than ever, you know.
I couldn't agree more, and that was beautifully said. And I have a new appreciation for your moniker now. It is one line away. That, I think that's as good a place as any to tie this off, man, because that was absolutely beautiful. I think we kind of touched on everything. Side note, also real quick, I do want to say congratulations on your success with introducing the poems to people and getting these commissions and making that move forward. If there's anything else you'd care to share before we get out of here, anything you feel that the people who listen to this show might want to hear?
Oh, I appreciate that. No, I mean, after that, you know, this is at the risk of being self-serving. I mean, the next best thing I could say is, you know, if you would do me the favor and go check out the music and the writing, you know, that's me trying to distill mine or our experience into something that maybe will touch you and impact you in a more interesting, less bumbling way than I'm doing here now. And of course, the support is always an honor. But yeah, no, I mean, I think I rambled quite a bit, but you know, I'm working on a lot of stuff, and I feel like right now I'm doing what I feel personally is some of my best work, and is a culmination of all the things I've done before and something beyond that. And so, you know, that's always a place that feels good to be in. So yeah, I mean, there's some new singles and there's some new things to listen to and to watch, and hopefully those things treat you well. And I appreciate if anyone chooses to listen to them or read them. And other than that, I mean, take care of each other, be good to yourselves. Buy some Death Before Desk Job merch.
Get out of here.
Support local.
That's my job, man. Come on.
Well, they can't see your hat, so I gotta say
they can't see my hat. Yeah,
which is an American Eagle hat. I don't know why I even said that. It's not a.
Is it an American Eagle hat?
No, I'm gonna make up. No, but everyone, he just looked at his own hat. You don't have a memory.
Well, no, I didn't know if you were so skilled and knowledgeable about that you would know the brand of merchandise. It's not American Eagle, guys.
I just wanted to riff on the idea that maybe people don't know that I know that your hat is a Death Before Desk Job hat. So just to say, no, but really, just be good to each other, have fun, be loving, be healthy, be safe. Do all the right health precautions. Be loving and all of that. I think that's more important than any of the other things. That stuff comes before everything. Feed you one another and love one another and take care of your people and other people's people, as though they were your own. Yeah. And that's it. Otherwise, that's what I got for y'all. And I appreciate you listening. And I appreciate you, Paul, for having me on and for
it's a pleasure, man.
Yeah, seriously. Letting me chase you down and grab your coattails a little.
Well, that's totally fine. Sometimes my coattails need grabbing. But to sort of mimic part of what you said back to you real quick, I want to say you and I, just like we would both appreciate the listeners going to check out your stuff. I want to let you know that I appreciate your support because you've been a day one for this podcast, since it came out, and just knowing that, again, we were not super close by any means. We knew of each other, but you've been actively sharing my show with others and getting people involved. And it's clear to me you have a great appreciation for the community and people doing things. I see you sharing not only my stuff, but other people's stuff and really being involved. So the least I could do was be supportive to you. And in return, I hope that the people listening to the show right now can go support AllOne, can Almost Elijah, check out the Doug's comic. You could get the book, This is Criminal, with the supporting EP, Dusty Dossiers. Is that correct?
Yeah. That's on the Bandcamp.
That's on the Bandcamp too.
Yeah.
There's so much. The easiest thing to do is go follow him on all the social platforms, Instagram and Twitter at AllOne Voice. Is that right?
Yes. Yep. That's it.
And also I want to say again, just thanks so much for coming on. And I do agree that it seems that you're doing your best work, and may you continue to do your best work for a long time.
Thank you very much, man. Thank you for what you do. It's been a pleasure to observe it all, man. It's
pleasure.
That's why I'm supporting, because it's quality work, and I think we all have needed it. And it's been a pleasure, brother. Thank you.
Well, thanks for keeping it quality with me. I'll talk to you soon. All right, dude?
All right. Take care, man.
Have a good one. Thank you, Bruce, for stopping by, and thank you for listening. If you want to learn more about Bruce, you can find him on Twitter and Instagram at AllOneVoice, and you can also find his work over at allonevoice.bandcamp.com. If you like the show and you like what you heard, please rate and subscribe on your preferred podcast platform. Subscribing to the show really helps. You can find all the destinations that the show is available at my website, deathbeforedeskjob.net. And if you have any questions about anything you heard or anything you'd like to hear, please contact me, deathbeforedeskjob@gmail.com. Oh, all right. With all that said, I just want to let you know, with Thanksgiving coming up, I cannot begin to express how grateful I am to you, the listeners, for keeping me going during what has been a tremendously difficult year. It could have gone a lot of ways, and I'm very, very happy it went the way that it did. I'm happy that this show exists. I'm happy to know you're here, and I don't know how else I can say it. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. It means the world to me. I'm not sure if I'll see you next week, but I love you guys, so I'm gonna do my damnedest to try. All right. Until next time, take care.